I am Erin Bombard, the Director of Communications and Business Development here at the Lake Champlain Chamber. The Lake Champlain Chamber, we work to power prosperity in the Lake Champlain region. And one of the ways we do that is providing businesses with the resources they need to excel here, which is what brings me here today and why I'm sitting down with attorney Jules Torti to discuss a topic that businesses are familiar with, want to do right by, but could use some more resources and information on. And that is the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA's, rules governing service animals. So, hi, Jules. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and role enforcing ADA.
Absolutely. So thank you for having me. Like you said, I think this is an area where people with disabilities want businesses to get it right, and businesses want to get it right. So I'm happy we can chat about the ways we can make that happen. I am an attorney with the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Vermont. I work here in Burlington, and I'm our office's Civil Rights Program Coordinator. And so in that capacity, I help the federal government enforce civil rights law here in Vermont.
Awesome. So it sounds like you have a very robust background in ADA. So I'm hoping you can answer all of my questions that I have for you, because we have a ton of questions to go over. But let's start with the basics. How does ADA define what a service animal is?
A service animal is a dog who is individually trained to do work or perform tasks for a person with a disability. As a fun fact, occasionally a miniature horse can qualify as a service animal, but the vast majority of service animals we see are dogs.
Okay. So does that mean, first of all, a miniature horse, I would love to have a miniature horse. I didn't know that that was a qualifying animal. Does that mean a disability could be a physical or psychiatric disability? What actually is that defined under ADA?
Yeah, so a disability can be either psychiatric or physical to qualify for having a service animal. Some examples, a service animal might be trained, for example, to alert to when someone with a seizure disorder is going to have a seizure and keep them safe during the seizure. That would be an example of a physical disability where someone would want a service dog. A veteran with PTSD, let's say, who has trouble going into areas that might be crowded with a lot of unknown people, might have a service animal who's trained to go into a store, make sure that everything is okay, and come back and let the person with a disability know that. So those are examples of ways that the disabilities that prompt people to get service animals can be either psychiatric or physical.
So I know we mentioned a lot about service dogs, but are there other animals that count under ADA, or what doesn't count as a service animal under ADA?
It's really just dogs, or in some unique circumstances, miniature horses. So if you see a ferret, if you see a cat, it is absolutely not a service animal under the ADA. There's a definition that we just went over, which is a dog that's trained to perform tasks for an individual with a disability. Dogs that don't qualify are sometimes those referred to as like companion animals or emotional support animals. These are dogs that give a person maybe comfort just by being with them, but aren't specifically trained to perform tasks related to that person's disability. So emotional support animals, even if they're dogs, do not qualify under the ADA as service animals.
Are there limit to breeds for dogs, or is it any breed that could qualify?
There's no breed limit. And in fact, businesses and other entities, organizations aren't allowed to restrict by breed. Any dog that is trained to perform tasks on behalf of an individual with a disability qualifies.
So I know we've all seen service animals walking around with their little vests. Do service animals have to wear the vest or a special harness indicating that they're a service animal?
No, a service animal doesn't have to wear anything in particular. You can buy those vests on online retailers, and they don't frankly mean anything one way or the other under the ADA. Although it's also important that you don't see an animal with a vest and say, oh, that's a fake, because some people with disabilities choose to buy those vests and put them on their animal for a lot of reasons, like so people don't touch the dog or don't interact or don't think it's a pet. So a vest doesn't mean anything one way or the other, but it's not required. And in fact, it can't be required. So a business can't make a rule saying you have to have your dog wear a vest or we don't count it as a service animal.
Are there special trainings or certificates that individuals have to go through?
With disabilities have the right to self-train their service animals. So there's no certification or training course or anything like that that is required for an animal to be a service animal. So that means that if you see like a certificate or some sort of training stamp of approval, those can be great, but they aren't required under the ADA. And just like the service vests that the dogs wear sometimes, businesses cannot require that a handler of a service animal produce any sort of certificate. There's not like a standard certification of these. And just like the service vests that you can buy online, you can actually buy certifications online saying that your dog is a service animal. So those things don't mean anything one way or another, but importantly for businesses, they can be required.
So what is actually required of a person with a disability who is accompanied by a service animal?
So the rules for businesses are fairly straightforward. It's not always true in law, so I actually like this area of law. Mm-hmm. Businesses can ask two questions when they see someone come into their business with an animal who may be a service animal. They can ask, is that dog a service animal required because of a disability? And they can ask, what tasks or work has that animal been trained to perform? That's it. That's it. So those are the two questions that businesses are allowed to ask. And businesses can take in the answers to those questions and determine if someone says, no, this is not a service animal, then that's not a service animal. If someone says, well, actually, the animal hasn't been trained to perform any tasks, then again, that's not a service animal. But if the person answers, yes, it's a service animal and explains what tasks it has been trained to perform, then the dog qualifies as a service animal and they should be admitted to the business. I think just asking these two questions and training staff to ask these two questions would go a hugely long way into ensuring compliance with the ADA in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems fairly straightforward with those two questions, but I'm curious to know if there's any other questions that individuals shouldn't ask. Do you have some examples of things that really shouldn't be brought up?
Absolutely. So businesses shouldn't ask people to get into details of their disability. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't ask for medical documentation. We touched on this earlier, but they shouldn't ask for a certification or for the animal to be wearing a vest or dressed in a certain way. Those are all things that businesses should steer clear of.
And I know another thing that businesses might run into is you're dealing with animals here. So is there anything that businesses potentially kick a service animal off the premises, and what are the circumstances where something like that would be allowed?
I'm glad you asked that, because I think there's this big misperception that, oh no, if we admit this animal, mm-hmm. we're stuck with this animal no matter how the animal behaves. And that's not true. There are circumstances where businesses can ask that the animal leave. And there are, just like there were two questions, there are two circumstances where businesses can ask that a service animal leave. When the animal is not housebroken, so if your carpet is being soiled, that is grounds to ask the animal to leave, or when the animal is out of control and the handler is not able to get the animal under control. It's important here to know that out of control doesn't mean like the dog barks once and then the handler is able to quiet it down. It would be like out of control barking in a place where that was inappropriate, like a theater or a library. If you're at a restaurant and the animal is interfering with the other customers in a way that is severe, the business could ask the animal to leave. Importantly, though, the first step should always be to ask the animal to leave to see if the person is okay receiving a service without the animal. And if that's not the case, both the animal and the human would have to leave. But it's important that businesses try to accommodate as much as possible. So in this case, it would be asking the dog to leave and still offering the services to the person with a disability.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you mentioned animals not being housebroken. So say the dog has an accident on facilities. Are businesses able to charge for any cleaning fees or other fees that might be associated with what happened when the dog was on the premise?
So this is a great question too. It comes up a lot with hotels. Mm-hmm. So if a hotel, for example, or I guess any sort of business that has dogs or animals on a regular basis has like a blanket policy where if a dog or a cat or an animal comes into our business space, we charge just a regular fee, cleaning fee for that animal's presence. No, that is not permitted to be applied to a service dog. They're not considered pets in the same way those other animals are. So routine fees are not permitted for service dogs, routine pet fees. However, if there is damage, if there's extra damage that is not just routinely charged to pets, the business can charge the person with a disability, the handler of the service animal, in the same way they would charge somebody else who had an animal that caused specific damage. So yeah, in the circumstance that you talked about, if an animal soiled the carpet and repairs were necessary, then yes, they could charge that to the person with a disability. I do, as we talk about, times when businesses could exclude animals or charge fees, I do want to underscore service animals generally are very, very well behaved, and this stuff is rare. I just think it's so important that businesses know that these things are possibilities or these things are options, so that they understand what, how to navigate difficult situations, and so that they aren't deterred from wanting to admit service dogs like they're required to do, because they just think they have no ability to handle situations as they arise. The ADA does allow for flexibility.
Yeah, I definitely think it makes businesses more comfortable approaching a situation like this, because it does, like you said, it makes them feel like they have a little bit more control, in that they could actually handle a situation when it arises, knowing what's available to them. So I know we talked a little bit about if the dog was in housebroken and some other issues that might arise, but could businesses restrict an animal in their facilities? Like if there's like a certain room that they don't want animals in, are they able to restrict where a service dog can be within the premise?
Not generally. So the ADA requires that people with disabilities who are accompanied by service dogs be able to go into any space that the general public is allowed to go. That's the kind of the general rule under the ADA. And I think the reasoning here is kind of obvious, right? We want people with disabilities to be able to have equal access to the goods and services that businesses provide. So if you're a restaurant with a salad bar and people without disabilities can go up to the salad bar and do some sort of food self-service, the dog is permitted to go, a service dog is permitted to go there with their handler, so their handler can access the salad bar. On the other hand, if you have a like kitchen in the back where members of the public are not generally permitted, then a person with a disability with a service dog also would not be permitted there. There are some really unique exceptions, like if you operate a zoo and there are a bunch of predators around, perhaps service animals can be excluded from like the bear section of the zoo. I'm not even really sure.
I would hope so. I would also like to be excluded from the bear section of the zoo, but yeah.
I wouldn't want to go there either, but the bears might mistake the service dog for lunch, and that might be disruptive to the operation of the zoo and kind of change the nature of the operation. So there are some really unique circumstances. And if folks have unique businesses and unique questions like that, there are plenty of lawyers in and around the Lake Champlain region who they can consult with on questions like that. But if you're a store, if you're a restaurant, a more kind of routine business, of which there are many types, generally the service dog should be allowed to go everywhere where other folks without service dogs are permitted to go.
Jules, you provided a really, really thorough overlook of ADA and service dogs. To kind of wrap things up, can you remind us of the 2 questions that businesses should be asking when they see a patron enter with a service dog?
Absolutely. First, they should ask or can ask, is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? And second, if the answer is yes, businesses are permitted to ask what work or tasks the dog has been trained to perform. And that's it. I could see businesses having those 2 questions like put on a card, by a reception stand or a place where employees would be able to see them and glance at them if they're confronted with a dog and not sure what to ask the person who's accompanied by the dog, or just doing some training with their staff on those 2 questions. But if businesses stick with those 2 questions, you're really in a safe zone. in terms of your own liability, and it goes a hugely long way towards respecting the rights of people with disabilities who I'm sure businesses want to access their business.
Absolutely. And I love the idea of having a card just handy for staff, especially as you're bringing in new staff all the time, just to have that accessible for anybody that's interacting. I think that's a great idea. Do you have any other suggestions or resources or people that businesses should be reaching out to if they want to learn more?
So ada.gov is a fantastic website with a wealth of information. There's information specifically for businesses. There's information specifically about service dogs. I think that we have a link that we're going to share to a FAQ document on ada.gov, and I certainly recommend that folks check that out. I also think we're going to put a link up to the Civil Rights Program at my office, to our website, which has a complaint form. If folks have had experiences that they think are not completely in line with the law and want to let us know about it, they can fill out a complaint form on our website. I should say that I'm also accessible to folks, both on the business side of things, trying to comply, and to folks with disabilities who want to talk about service animal issues in the area. Our office's goal is compliance with the law. We do litigate, we bring cases, folks make a complaint, we can do investigations, we can see what went on and bring a lawsuit if necessary. But we also do a lot of outreach and education to try to get folks to comply with the law before a situation happens that would prompt litigation. The idea is civil rights enforcement, however that happens.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, this is great. And like Jules mentioned, to everybody that's listening, we will include all of these resources alongside this video. We encourage everybody to check them out and follow up if you have any more questions. But thank you so much, Jules, for joining me. This has been really informative, and I really hope it's been helpful for our business community.
Thanks a lot. Take care.